Every week, I provide access to authentic documents from closed archives. There is no artistic fiction here. If you're watching this, it means the material has already breached the system. We assume no responsibility for what you learn. Subscribe. Knowledge is irreversible. That day, a young woman came to my appointment. She was thin, pale, and visibly frightened. She kept blinking her blue eyes while I flipped through the pages of her medical chart, waiting for me to say something, anything. According to her cycle, she was 12 weeks pregnant, and she had no idea until she took the test. It wasn't the rarest story, but the girl genuinely seemed unable to understand how it could have happened. "How could I have gotten pregnant? From who?" she whispered to herself. I felt sorry for her. It was obvious she was completely lost. "I didn't sleep with anyone. I've never done that with anyone, you understand?" She whispered quietly, afraid to even say the word starting with S. "Don't worry," I replied calmly. "Sometimes tests can show false positives. It could be a hormonal imbalance. To be sure, we need an ultrasound." I referred her for the standard procedure, but this time, everything was far from standard. Some time later, the girl returned with a face as if she were attending a funeral. She clutched the ultrasound image tightly in her trembling hands. In such reports, they usually describe the position of the fetus and count the limbs. But this one said, 6-headed fetus, 8 worm-like appendages. I took the image and stared at the blurry picture. It looked like a bunch of grapes, several fused spheres from which a tangle of tentacles extended. No torso, no arms or legs, just horror. With 15 years of experience, I had seen many developmental anomalies, but nothing like this, not even in teratology textbooks. 6 heads, 8 worm-like appendages, an intrauterine nightmare captured on an ultrasound scan. I looked at the girl. Her lips were trembling. She tried to hide her tears, nervously twisting the hem of her dress with anxious fingers. "Nancy Ann, take a look at this," I said to the nurse, handing her the paper and the image. Her eyes widened behind her glasses. "Is it very bad?" the patient asked. "The pathology is extremely serious," I answered. "Only termination is possible here." And suddenly she sighed with visible relief, as if all this time she had been afraid someone would force her to give birth to this multi-headed thing. "I didn't want this," the girl said. I remained silent. What was there to say? The image showed a cluster of spheres and long appendages. The fetus looked completely non-viable. The patient stood up to leave, but suddenly stopped and looked at me with a frightening detachment. "You know," she whispered, "nothing happened 3 months ago. But I had a terrible dream, as if I fell into a grave filled with huge snakes. They wrapped around me with their tails, strangled me, and crawled into different places. Then I woke up, and I was all sticky." I didn't attach much importance to her words. The girl was in shock, and pregnant women are often prone to superstitions. Although in hindsight, someone should have reported this to the authorities. Perhaps she simply didn't understand what had happened to her. Someone could have drugged her. The nightmare might have been nothing but narcotic hallucinations. It was just a short episode in the endless medical marathon. It was only a brief episode in the insane medical marathon. Then came the usual endless examinations, tests, and consultations. The rhythm of every doctor's life. 6 months passed, and I had almost forgotten about the pregnant girl and her monstrous fetus. I heard that the abortion went successfully without complications. Her further fate no longer interested me. I was too busy. Life went on in its routine way, and then the nightmare began. One day I returned to my lonely apartment and saw chaos. The place smelled of blood, that scent you can never mistake for anything else. Everything was overturned, scattered, broken. Chairs lay upside down. Books were strewn across the floor, as if a whirlwind had swept through. On the light walls and furniture were red sticky spots and splashes, like brains from a madman. Bloody trails led to the bedroom window. The curtains had been torn down along with the rod, and the glass was shattered. Something wounded and animal-like had rampaged through the apartment, destroying everything in its path before leaping out the window. Perhaps it had entered the same way, smashing through the double-pane glass. But what kind of creature could do this? No bird was capable of such destruction. And how could anything reach the 6th floor? I was shaking. Some superstitious fear inside me whispered that this was not hooliganism or robbery, but something else entirely. I called the police and waited for the officers. While they were on their way, it occurred to me to collect blood and mucus samples for analysis. In my medical kit, I found sterile containers and used them. I could study the samples much faster at the clinic with proper equipment. I was capable of analyzing the blood composition myself. When the police arrived, they had the same questions I did. Since there were no signs of forced entry, the first suspicions fell on me. "Do you drink?" one officer asked, squinting. "No, I don't drink at all," I protested. They bombarded me with questions about my job, lifestyle, mental health, whether I could have killed someone, hidden the body, then forgotten, or stabbed myself in a fit. I shook my head negatively to everything. The officers took photos of the crime scene, collected samples, and before leaving handed me a paper not to leave town. The case was murky, and they hadn't yet decided if I was the victim or the perpetrator. Fools. At least they allowed me to clean up. Money helped the rest. I made a couple of calls, and by evening the window in the bedroom was replaced. The apartment sparkled with cleanliness. Crime scene cleaners even managed to scrub the crimson stains from the walls as if they had never existed. The masters worked quickly and silently. I earned well, but behind the feeling of relief, a vague suspicion lingered that something was wrong. The next morning, when I arrived at work, the nurse read everything on my face. "Victor Alexander, is everything okay?" Nancy Ann asked. "Yes," I answered automatically, but unexpectedly even for myself, I began to tell her. "Yesterday, someone trashed my apartment and broke the window." Nancy Ann's eyes widened, her face turning paler. "Are you serious?" she asked. "And my car is at the shop. Someone smashed the windshield. Some kind of black streak." "Okay, we'll get through it," I muttered. We didn't return to the topic again. Low, dark clouds hung over me. Rain lashed my face. Cold streams ran down my temples and neck, soaking my clothes. I stood barefoot on the slippery ground. Before me stretched a black abyss. The rain had an acrid smell of alcohol and formalin. Along with the drops from the sky, tiny infants fell like little toy dolls. They poured down silently, without a sound, disappearing into the darkness of the abyss. There were infinitely many of them. I dropped to my knees to peer into the void and see what was down there in the darkness. Suddenly, from the depths came a serpentine rustling, as if something enormous and slimy was crawling upward. Then something large leaped straight into my face. I woke up with my heart pounding like crazy. I jumped out of bed, grabbed my phone, and checked the time. 4:28 a.m. I could have slept another hour and a half, but I couldn't calm my nerves. I had never had dreams like this before. The nightmare was so vivid, realistic, filled with terrifying sounds and unbearable smells. The images kept resurfacing in my mind and wouldn't let me sleep. I had to start the day earlier than usual. Then came the morning routine: shower, coffee, ironing my coat, checking emails. All this gradually dulled the impression of the dream and reduced the anxiety. I had always been a materialist, for whom nothing existed that couldn't be seen, touched, or measured. After all, the medical profession obliges one to trust only what science approves. Such nonsense as nightmares meant nothing to me. Still, an unpleasant aftertaste remained. I entered the clinic, hoping for a calm workday, but that wasn't to be. A detective was waiting for me there, an unfamiliar young man with dark hair, a beard, and a penetrating gaze. At first, I thought he had come about the break-in, but I was wrong. He brought much more terrible news. Nurse Nancy Ann had been murdered. She was strangled in the entrance of her own building. I tried to say something, but the words stuck in my throat. The detective, however, didn't care about my feelings. He was only interested in what I knew. As it turned out, at the exact time of the murder, I had been at the police station inquiring about progress on my own case. In the end, a frightening chain of events was forming. Someone had broken into my apartment with intent to harm, then smashed Dr. Irene Higgins's car windshield. Suspiciously simultaneous catastrophes had befallen us. "Doesn't it seem to you that your life is also in danger?" the detective asked, as if reading my thoughts. "It looks like someone is hunting you. Do you suspect anyone? Did you and your colleague have any common enemies? Where would they come from? We are peaceful people." Although there had been one incident long ago, I had convinced a woman to terminate her pregnancy after an examination. The fetal developmental defects were obvious. Then her enraged partner showed up at the clinic. He was seething with hatred and called me a murderer. Like a man possessed, he repeated that if God had sent them this child, he would have taken care of the rest. Only he had the right to decide who lives. "Who do you think you are? God?" he had screamed, preparing to attack, but security had restrained him. There had been such fathers before. Someone among them could easily have gone mad and seen us doctors as enemies worthy of death. Returning home was dangerous. It would be wiser to spend the night in a hotel, but after my shift I wasn't in a hurry to leave the clinic. I wanted to find some thread in this tangle of events. The building had almost emptied. It became quiet. I went into the laboratory, turned on the lights, put on gloves, and began working on the samples I had collected yesterday from my apartment. The blood turned out to be human. The analyses confirmed it, showing the usual picture of erythrocytes, leukocytes, and platelets. No surprise there. But the protein mucus was quite strange. Humans simply don't have organs capable of secreting anything like it. This viscous substance resembled the secretion of glands from cephalopod mollusks, for example, an octopus. The very slime that serves for lubrication, protection, and facilitating the movement of tentacles. I sat hunched over the microscope, hearing only my own thoughts, when suddenly there was a quiet click, followed by the slow creak of the door. I turned around on the chair. The door was open, but no one was behind it, empty. "It's just the draft," I tried to calm myself, but then a sharp rustle rolled across the floor. Something large slithered. A cold noose squeezed my neck. It all happened in the blink of an eye. I didn't even manage to see who attacked me. Something sticky and elastic gripped my throat with inhuman force. I was suffocating. Everything went dark before my eyes. It was impossible to break free. My hands slipped. My fingers couldn't catch hold of the smooth flesh. I jumped up from the chair. Something heavy hung on my back like a weight, and the choking only intensified. Then I turned, lunged forward, and collapsed onto the table. My hand found a scalpel, and without thinking, I plunged the blade into the sliding tentacle. I cut, hacked, did everything just to stop it. Behind my back came several immediate cries. The injured creature thrashed. Thick blood flowed. The grip suddenly weakened, and it flopped onto the floor. Now I could see what it was. A monster. 6 fused infant heads and a multitude of writhing appendages of flesh color. The heads screamed with their eyes squeezed shut. The half-severed tentacle barely moved. A puddle of blood spread across the tiles. I stared at this creature and couldn't believe it was real in front of me. The twisting, writhing horror destroyed all my ideas about nature. A picture from the past pierced my memory. How similar this freak was to the ultrasound image I had seen 6 months ago. The same cluster of infant heads, the same tentacles. How could this creature have come into the world? The abortion had definitely been performed. And suddenly, the cluster of infant heads stopped screaming. It rose on its tentacles, and in one instant slithered out the door, leaving only a bloody trail behind. After recovering a little from what I had seen, I ran for help. The security guard sat at his post. calmly sipping coffee. It turned out he hadn't heard any noise. I demanded to see the camera footage. We both leaned over the monitor. The guard, surprised by my condition, asked no extra questions and turned on the video. And there it was. Literally 10 minutes ago, a blurry beige spot had slipped through the main entrance of the clinic. The guard enlarged the scale and began viewing the recording frame by frame. His face changed with every second. "What kind of abomination is this?" the man whispered in astonishment. "Can something like this even exist in nature?" Suddenly, somewhere deep in the building, glass rang. "It's there!" the guard shouted. He grabbed his baton and ran down the corridor. One of the windows was broken. The devilish creature had escaped. I wanted to figure everything out immediately. I found the patient's card, Emily Reed, that same young girl. The abortion had been performed by obstetrician-gynecologist Dr. Irene Higgins. I had her number in my contacts. I dialed the number. A sleepy voice answered. "Good evening, Dr. Higgins," I said, looking at the patient's card. "Could you spare me a minute? This is very important. Do you remember a girl named Emily Reed, born in 2006? "Doesn't ring a bell," the woman replied after a pause. "She was with you 6 months ago. You performed an abortion. She had a very strange embryo with 6 heads and worm-like appendages," I reminded her. "Oh yes, that freak is hard to forget," she exclaimed. "What about it?" "Could you tell me what happened to it afterward?" I asked. "We didn't dispose of it with the patient's permission. We preserved it in formaldehyde as a curious specimen for research. But you won't be able to look at it. Several months ago, something happened in the storage room. We still haven't figured out what. In short, total destruction. Many samples were ruined. It might have escaped." "Escaped?" accidentally slipped out of me. I imagined broken glass containers, spilled liquid, and this creature crawling out. "Did you escape?" Dr. Higgins sounded surprised. "Listen, Victor, you'd better be careful. Your life is in danger," I warned her. "Yeah, got it. Thanks for the info. Have a good evening," she said and hung up. She simply didn't believe me. Emily Reed's phone number was listed in the medical card. I dialed it, but only the soulless voice of the answering machine responded. "The subscriber's phone is switched off or out of network coverage." "No, this won't do," I said aloud. I needed to see her and talk. Paranoia flared up in me, and the insane guess seemed quite realistic. The monster was taking revenge on everyone who had prevented its birth into the world. I had to learn the truth. Therefore, I immediately got into the car and drove to the patient's registered address. 10 minutes later, I was there. An old district, a dark courtyard, dirty asphalt, and a 5-story Khrushchev-era building. I approached the intercom door and dialed the apartment number. An elderly woman's tired voice answered. "Yes?" "Hello, may I see Emily Reed?" I asked. "You may not," the woman answered sharply. "It's very important," I insisted. "Who is asking?" "I'm her doctor from gynecology." The woman was silent for a few seconds, then replied, "If you're a doctor, you should know. My Emily was strangled a month ago." Sobs and crying came from the speaker, followed by a sharp click of the receiver being hung up. I remained standing by the door, feeling myself go cold. So it was true. The devilish child had killed its own mother. How did it find people? By scent? Could it detect them from a distance? This was some kind of mysticism. Running and hiding right now, this creature could penetrate anywhere, crawl along walls, climb through windows, attack in sleep. My recent nightmare had been a warning. To hell with work. Survival was now the priority. I got into the car, hit the gas, and drove until I reached a small backwater town. I rented a cheap room in an old hotel and stayed there for 2 nights until I found housing. I rented a modest 1-room apartment somewhere on the outskirts. The conditions in this dump was something else. Everything was old, broken, and creaky. A rusty bathtub, a noisy Soviet-era refrigerator, woven rugs on the floor, a white lace tablecloth on the table. It felt like I had stepped straight into the 1980s. The place cost me only $1,000 a day. I had long been unaccustomed to such conditions, but there was no choice. My phone rang off the hook every day. Friends, colleagues, and management tried to reach me. At first, I didn't answer anyone, but eventually I called the head physician and said there were unforeseen circumstances. "Good to know you're at least alive," the head doctor replied instead of scolding me. "Things are going to hell here. Did you hear? There's been another murder." I already guessed. Dr. Irene Higgins was found strangled in her own home. Everything points to a maniac hunting doctors, and still no arrests, no suspects. I don't know what to think anymore. My colleague hadn't listened to me. Now she was dead too. Everyone involved in the abortion had been killed. Only I remained. Would I be next? I sat in that shabby apartment, filled the electric kettle and turned it on. Everything was as usual. Nothing foreshadowed trouble. I was simply waiting to make myself a mug of hot coffee. Then came a sharp, deafening blow. The ventilation grill above the stove flew out and hit the opposite wall with such force that the whole kitchen shook. My heart froze in my chest. This was no accident. It had come for me. The devilish child had found me. A thick, sticky tentacle shot out of the ventilation pipe, nearly grabbing me by the neck. I had to step back. Right before my eyes, the abomination crawled out of the wall, demonstrating impossible flexibility. First, the tentacles emerged, then the first infant head, followed by another and another. The creature flowed down the wall like a bubbling, disgusting substance, almost liquid. "Help!" I screamed, knowing no one would hear me. The six-headed child crashed onto the stove with a thud and flopped onto the floor. One of its tentacles was shorter than the others. Half of it had been cut off during our previous encounter. 6 mouths opened at once, and a horrifying wail filled the apartment, tearing at my eardrums. Slimy appendages reached for my legs. I felt their cold touch. The only thing at hand was the boiling kettle. I grabbed it and threw it at the abomination with a cry. Boiling water engulfed the monster. Instantly, the kitchen filled with steam. Flesh peeled from the infant heads, exposing pale pink meat. Yet the creature kept crawling toward me with fury. I waited for the right moment. My heart was about to burst out of my chest. When the hellish child came close enough, I grabbed the refrigerator and brought its entire weight down. The metal box crashed onto the creature with a thunderous roar. Several infant heads burst with a crack, splashing dark red mass across the walls and floor. The kitchen turned into a bloody nightmare. There was a disgusting sound of tearing muscles. I saw how the only surviving head, on its 2 remaining tentacles, separated from the crushed mass. It tried to crawl away. "Stand still!" I roared, feeling a surge of wild strength. Adrenaline surged through my blood, drowning out the fear. I couldn't let it escape. The last pathetic piece of filth crawled toward the exit, leaving a sticky trail. I jumped over the refrigerator, wanting to crush this little head, turn it into bloody pulp, and destroy it completely. But with a piercing squeal, it darted out of the kitchen and flew into the bathroom. I rushed in after it, but it quickly dived into the toilet and seeped into the pipe. Damn it! I stood there watching the reddish water splash in the bowl, shaking with rage. A particle of that child had still managed to escape. Unexpected, tragic twist. Only a week later, while hiding in another state under a false name, I was arrested. The police found my DNA on Nancy Ann's body, on Dr. Higgins, and even traces in Emily Reed's apartment. The monstrous slime I had analyzed matched samples found at all crime scenes. In my panic, I had become the perfect suspect, the only survivor with motive and opportunity. No one believed my story about the creature. They called it a psychotic break. As I sit in the cell awaiting trial for multiple murders I didn't commit, I sometimes hear faint slithering in the pipes at night. And I realize the last piece is still out there, growing stronger, waiting. I stopped its birth, but in the end, it took everything from me: my life, my freedom, my name. The real monster won.